What's going on, everyone? Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres with ScoopDuck on 3, coming to you on Thursday, September 18th, 2025. Week 4 of the college football slate is here, which features the number 6 Oregon Ducks taking on the rival Oregon State Beavers on Saturday in Eugene, 12 p.m. kickoff on the Big Ten Network. It's going to be a fun one. You love getting a little bit of rivalry action earlier in the year now, seeing that Oregon is in the Big Ten. And joining me to break it all down is Brenden Slaughter. He is the publisher of BeaversEdge, part of the On3 network. Brenden, thanks for being here, man. How are you?
Max, what's going on, man? Absolutely thrilled to be on with you and, preview a game that I think we all know the result's going to be probably a little lopsided this weekend. Lots of news, nevertheless, going down in Corvallis, and excited to catch up with you, my man.
I'm very excited as well. Obviously with the Rivals merger, we added a lot of team sites at On3 and BeaversEdge being one of them. So it's nice to lean into the power of the network, bring you on, get a local perspective on the Beavs, because this is a game that maybe not a lot of college football fans put too much stock into, but it means a lot to people in the state of Oregon and has a lot of history behind it. So I'm excited to dive into this one with you and just get your feel for things out your way in Beaverland, we can call it. Obviously, these programs are in two very different spots with everything that's happened with the Pac-12. I think a lot of people were bummed about that, all the tradition that they had kind of lost. But there's still plenty to talk about. Obviously, Oregon's coming off of a win over Northwestern. Oregon State, a 45-14 loss to Texas Tech. But just to kind of wade into the waters here, Brenden, to get us started, What's the mood around Corvallis right now? What's the vibe around the fan base, would you say?
Yeah, I think, Max, first off, and again, also want to echo the awesomeness of having the On3 network and getting to work with you now, too. I think that's just an awesome thing. And I think, to answer your question, it's a duality, at least from what we're seeing from the outside. I think the fan base, there's probably 95% frustrations on what's going on. However, what we continue to hear from Trent Bray and the players these first few weeks is not necessarily the meme of the little guy where the house is on fire and everything's fine, but also just they're like, oh, that's outside noise. That's outside noise. What you guys say is outside noise. We talked about it a little bit before we started recording. I think Trent Bray was taken aback by Oregonian columnist Bill Orum's questions talking about, is he the right guy for the job? Does he want this job? And even to that point was like, can you repeat the question? Because he was so taken aback. So I think, the fan base pressure is probably the highest right now because you paid $1.5 million from Malik Murphy. You brought back some pretty nice pieces from last year. Trent Walker, Anthony Hankerson, the defense, which was so maligned last year, was pretty much, they had a lot of injuries, and a lot of those guys were going to be back this year. So there was just kind of a natural expectation that when you took a 5-win campaign last year with pretty poor quarterback play and a kind of put together with glue team, that a more cohesive unit, the second year of Trent Bray, like optimistically, I kind of had an optimistic, hey, I could see 8 wins this year. But I'm not lying to you, Max. My floor was 6 wins. I was like, even if things go incredibly wrong, I see 6 wins for this team this year. So in that sense, nobody could have quite predicted how the Beavers would self-inflict themselves these first 3 weeks. We've had so many questions on our message boards over the first couple weeks, like, well, where were the snapping issues in camp? Where were these issues in camp? And to be honest with you, Max, a lot of the issues we're seeing on Saturdays, they weren't showing us in camp throughout the year, or throughout August, I should say. And Oregon State, I know comparatively to Oregon State, they're wide open fall camp practices. That's 2 hours, 16 days in August where you can sit on those metal bleachers and catch up and watch everything. So I think that is what the fan base is frustrated at. They've read us, they've read others, there was some optimism. And then you see on the field, it may not even necessarily be the players. I think in a game like Texas Tech and a game like Oregon, sure, Oregon State's overmatched in some particular areas. But Cal and Fresno State, those two games kind of come back to being outcoached at the end of the day. And that's something that Oregon State fans have not been too patient with here early on.
And it's a tough spot to be in, Brenden, because we know that there is a relative talent gap clearly between Oregon and
Sure.
Oregon State. Oregon State doesn't recruit at the level that Oregon does in the portal or in high school rankings. But to me, at least in the last couple of years, maybe you could say before Trent Bray under Jonathan Smith more, they seemed like a program that kind of did more with less, like gritty offensive line play, fairly fundamentally sound. And it's tough to see them in this position given what's going on with the Pac-12. And like, I was pretty surprised when Orem asked that question, like you referenced, like, are you the guy for the job? Given that it's,
Yeah.
I think, the second year of his tenure and where things are at. So I feel like the expectations for Oregon State aren't very high. But at the same time, we have to talk about Malik Murphy because I was covering him coming out of high school, and he was one of the most coveted quarterback
Yeah.
recruits, one of the most coveted arms in the country. And this is a guy who doesn't look like your typical Oregon State quarterback. You don't need me to tell you, but like, dude's like 6'5", probably pushing 240. Like, he is just a massive human being, has probably the best arm of any quarterback that Oregon's faced to date. And I kind of thought that they'd be able to get some more out of him because that's a pretty splashy name.
Oh, for sure. And the high school comparison is spot on there, Max. I mean, it's so funny the high school comparisons to DJU a couple years back, where it's like, would Oregon State have had a prayer at this kid out of high school? No. That wasn't going to happen. Same with a guy like DJU. But the way the transfer portal works, maybe one situation works out, one doesn't. And Oregon State found themselves being, the best looking girl at the ball, so to speak. And I think, this season, he's got a few picks. You almost have to write off about two of those picks because they were like, I think, both clinchers against Cal and Fresno State. Put it bluntly, with the throws he can make on the field, he's at least the best Oregon State quarterback since Jake Luton. And considering Jake Luton kind of had an up and down, health career when he was at Oregon State, had a bad injury and came back. Love Jake, but you want to go pure talent. Like if he was a 4-year starter in those old situations, I think he could be like Sean Mannion level. And that for Oregon State was probably, in my opinion, their last quote elite quarterback. And the problem is, Max, is the offensive line in front of him. And that offensive line has continued to be an issue as to not only pass protection, but run blocking too. Because you mentioned the success of Oregon State, pretty much going back to the post Gary Anderson era. The way that Oregon State has found success is a strong running game. That strong running game opens up the play action passing game where a good quarterback like Murphy can go through 3, 4, 5 different progressions potentially and find the open man. The problem that I've seen this year is the Beavers, like against Tech this last weekend, I think they had 11 carries for like 4 yards, something along those lines. Again, I'm just quoting, don't have that number right in front of me, but the run game was horrible and they could not run the ball. Once that happened, Texas Tech was kind of able to pin their ears back, play coverage, and really come after Murphy. And that's where you saw some good throws. He was able to make some throws amidst like a linebacker and a defensive back. I'm like, how did you fit it in there? So interestingly enough, you talk back to the consensus. The few fans that I've talked about, Max, are like, wow, like I really like our quarterback. That's a quarterback who can do a lot of different things. The problem is, and I think he's got good receivers. I just think the offensive line, the false starts, the delay of games, the just lack of run game, with the exception of Fresno State, has just been brutal towards, Murphy trying to settle in here early on.
And the play of the offensive line, I think, to me, maybe strikes me as one of the more surprising developments. I know you got your new guys in there with Trent Bray coming in following Jonathan Smith's departure, but there is one name that a lot of Oregon fans are familiar with that's in Corvallis now, in Mike Cavanaugh.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a really good piece to that Oregon offensive line staff. So seeing that he's back in Corvallis, one of probably the only job that I think he would leave Oregon for, given
Sure, yeah.
how tenured he was there, and how he's really got roots in Oregon with his family and everything, being a grandpa. I just would have thought that the offensive line play would have been a little bit better. So that's an area where we could see Oregon take advantage, especially given guys on that defensive line like Amari Washington and Mateo Uyunglele. Tatum Tuioti is somebody that I've been really high on this year. I think that maybe some of the script for their opponents has been to get the ball out sooner, but we could see Oregon take a bigger, leap at Malik Murphy, if you will. So that's one of the areas I'm going to be looking for. Just to kind of wrap up some offensive talk, Brenden.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit what these weapons have kind of been like so far. I know David Wells Jr. was the leading receiver last week with 6 catches for 103 yards against Texas Tech. And then Trent Walker is a guy that the Oregon staff is familiar with, given some of their history.
Yeah, honestly, it's been a nice development, and it's what shows me some confidence about Murphy and the offense if they could just find a way to get the run game going. And I think that's kind of the overarching light at the end of the tunnel, Max, for Oregon State fans is after Saturday, there won't be an opponent on the schedule nearly as tough as the two they've faced the last 2 weeks. So I think for Oregon State fans, it's also just kind of about getting through this because – yeah, when they've got that run game going, it opens up everything else. And, going back to the receivers, as you mentioned, Trent Walker had a huge game against Cal, notably so going into Fresno State. They adjust, and then it's Taz Reddix, who has a huge game against Fresno State. And then most likely Texas Tech adjusting, being like, hey, Trent Walker, Taz Reddix have been the guys. Then David Wells has a nice game. So coming into the year, we expected Portland's own Darius Clemens to be Oregon State's number 2 receiver. He unfortunately suffers an Achilles injury in camp, and best wishes to that kid because that was a real rough injury, and he had a really good chemistry with Malik Murphy building throughout camp. But all of a sudden, with that development, Oregon State was right back to where they were last year with poor quarterback play, Max, which was everybody can throw the ball to Trent Walker. It's a little iffy everywhere else. And, so to see Taz Reddix step up, to see David Wells step up has been good. Bryce Caulfield, the tight end, caught his first touchdown against Tech. The tight ends have not been involved as much as you would have liked to have seen. There hasn't really been a couple other receivers besides those 3. So it's just been an inconsistent bag. And in the sense that the Fresno State game was really good. They tallied over 500 offensive yards. I kind of thought, hey, after that Cal game, they turned the corner. And then up until garbage time, it was really bad against Texas Tech. So it's really kind of just been a comedy of errors is kind of the best way we've been able to describe it this week. And again, the hope for Oregon State fans is you let one slip against Cal. You really, really gave one away against Fresno State. Now you have your 2 scheduled losses. What can you do to not keep the team from falling apart at 0-4? Because the opportunity for 5-6 wins over that final 8 is still possible.
I like the Darius Clemens shout out because I know that we haven't talked very much, but I did live in Eugene for a couple years when I first got my gig covering the Ducks, and Darius Clemens was the only in-state recruit that I covered during that time when he was at Westview. We know he spent a couple years at Michigan before landing at Oregon State. And Darius Clemens is quarterback at Westview, none other than Sam Levitt, who's just tearing it up now at Arizona State. I feel like every other pass was a pick in that Westview game that I covered against Tualatin at the time. But he's balling out, and you love to see that from a native Oregonian. To give a little... Sorry, go for it.
And just real quick, Max, and Sam Levitt, Darius Clemens, some others, what's all this talk that Oregon can't produce, top college talent, man? I mean, I know it's not Texas, but maybe give them some due, man.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think, even more recently, like you have a guy like Ryan Walk, who's an Oregonian, and he played really well at Oregon, and now he's on the Oregon staff. Like they definitely have those guys here and there. So I think that they're definitely due some more flowers for the state of Oregon. Just to give a little bit more commentary on the Oregon side of things here defensively, Jerry Mixon is a guy that a lot of Oregon fans are excited about heading into this game. He feels like one of the defenders that has come on the strongest so far in 2025. There were some questions about who was going to be that linebacker next to Bryce Betcher. A lot of people thought it was going to be Devin Jackson, but through 3 games, it seems very apparent that Jerry Mixon has a great instinct and a nose for the football, grabbing an interception in the last 2 games. And he's kind of been the one that's leading some of the way with that trash talk heading into this rivalry. And Lanning was asked about it on Wednesday, and he said, well, you got to back it up. So that was kind of an interesting little nugget there as the Ducks kind of prepare to host the Beavs here.
Yeah, it's personally, I love it in a good rivalry game. I caught up with those same clips that you mentioned too, and I did find it kind of interesting that Dan Lanning kind of doubled down on it and was like, well, you got to back it up. I don't think there's much worry that Oregon can't back it up, but nevertheless, kind of interesting. I think Malik Murphy was asked about it, and you can find that exchange over at our BeaversEdge Twitter. And, he was just kind of like, I love it. It's not necessarily my style to clap back or whatever, but you love to see it in a rivalry. And we just learned, Max, that this rivalry is going to continue. So far, I don't think the reactions have been super great from Oregon State fans from what I've seen. But nevertheless, it's going to continue. And after, a 2026 hiatus, he'll be back at Autzen Stadium, most likely in 2027. So it's something we're going to be talking about for a while yet. And I think, overall, I love a good trash talk, man. I mean, you're talking about, Oregon State, and I think Oregon State's maybe produced the greatest, if not, okay, maybe MJ, but the second greatest NBA trash talker of all time in Gary Payton Sr. So, and not to mention too, I hope there's a little bit from both sides. We always know Oregon State's kind of a little bit more the underdog coming into this game. I hope maybe there's some things being said, text messages behind the scenes and stuff. That just adds more flair to a rivalry. And I'll be honest with you, Max, I grew up with this rivalry, as long as I can remember, been to this rivalry well before I was in my reporting days. And it's not the same. It is not the same. So I wonder what they can do to kind of bring back some of the pizzazz that I remember from like the early 2000s, so to speak.
Yeah, it definitely feels like, reminiscent to what Gundy was saying earlier this year. It's like they're just not playing the same sport because of the resources and where the programs are at and all that stuff that we know very well. When you were talking about trash talk, I thought you were going to go the Chad Ochocinco route. He is one of the better ones. He's been one of the better ones in the NFL have come out of Oregon State. We will have some more on Oregon and Oregon State, hopping over to a little bit of the Duck offense right after this. Duck fans, are you going to an Oregon game this season? If you are, the Oakway Lifestyle Center at the corner of Oakway and Coburg is the destination for Duck fans. Whatever you're looking for, they've got it all. Get a bite to eat at Center River Brewing or PF Chang's. Check out shops like Lululemon or Nordstrom Rack. Need a place to stay? Book your lodging at the Hyatt Place at Oakway Center and visit their rooftop bar. The Oakway Lifestyle Center is walking distance from Autzen Stadium, has something for everybody, and is a great post-game place to celebrate another Duck victory. Max Torres of ScoopDuck on 3 back with you here on the Ducks Dish podcast, Thursday, September 18th, 2025. Prepping for the Civil War with my guy, Brenden Slaughter of BeaversEdge, part of the On 3 network. Brenden, let's talk a little bit about Oregon State's defense and Oregon's offense to ride us off into the sunset here on this preview episode of this weekend's rivalry game. I mean, Oregon's offense is kind of what we expected it to be. You came out a little slow against Northwestern. You were without Noah Whittington, the starting running back, who seems like he is probably at best questionable to play this weekend against Oregon State. Probably a guy that you don't need necessarily if you're Oregon. And I think fans probably look at that as an opportunity to give a young guy like De'Aaron Hill Jr., who's got crazy juice, some more carries in this Will Stein offense, some more touches, whatever you have it, just get the guy involved. Where's this Oregon State defense at? What have you kind of been able to glean from the first couple weeks here?
Yeah, the defense, obviously, you probably point to it when Oregon State's 0-3, and there have been some moments, but yet at the same token, I really feel like this defense can be broken into the fact that they break at the worst times, right? They say a good defense bends, doesn't break, right? It's college football. You're not going to, constantly lock down teams. Teams will sometimes be able to gain yards between the 20s. Now, you go back against Cal, and right away, Oregon State was like, okay, we're not ready for the deep shot over the top and Cal freshman. I'm just gonna call him Jaron. I still haven't nailed that last name. Yep, still haven't nailed that entirely, even after watching him torch Oregon State. But they go 2 over-the-top fade passes, 14-0 before Oregon State can even blink. Fresno State, much different game. That was kind of a back-and-forth game. I think we're going to find out by the end of the year. Fresno's probably a 4 or 5 win team, which I think is going to probably really frustrate Oregon State fans, give or take maybe the 6 for them. Then you go against Texas Tech, and they kind of borrowed that Cal blueprint. They're like, hey, we're going to take 2 shots right over the air immediately following, let me tell you, Max, the craziest weather delay I've ever seen ever sat and witnessed in my life. I wasn't physically there, but it felt all day waiting for that rain or lightning delay to be over. But once it is, it's like Texas Tech picked up right where they left off. 1 deep shot over the top, 2 deep shots over the top, 14-0, same exact picture as Cal. The interesting thing after that, Oregon State actually forced a couple Texas Tech punts in the game. There were actually a couple moments when it was 14-0, 21-0, where the game was still within, respectability. Like, hey, you score a touchdown here, you never know what happens. But for whatever reason, Oregon State's defense, like, I go back, there was a 1st and 25 given up on one play, Max, and then there was a 3rd and 36 that resulted in a touchdown, and a 3rd and 24 that resulted in a touchdown. And if you're Trent Bray and Oregon State's defense, like those are the plays that make you want to rip your hair out on the sideline. When you get an opponent into a 3rd and long, you get aided by, a penalty, this, that, and Texas Tech was still able to be like, yeah, all good. We'll still find a way to score. And I think that goes back to Oregon State's tackling, which was just really bad against Texas Tech. It's got to be better. It was against, it showed moments in the first 3 games, but it hasn't been where it is. If I'm kind of, Oregon's offense in this game, obviously the bread and butter being the run game, I don't see why Oregon wouldn't want to take a couple shots with Dante Moore over the top just right away, see if they can connect, because that's something Oregon State's been vulnerable to so far. As far as the run defense goes, it showed spurts. There were areas against Tech I liked it, areas against Tech or Cal that I liked it, and Fresno, take away like 1 or 2 big runs, it did look good. It's just been like when you combine the poor special teams, and maybe we'll talk about that next, the inconsistencies on offense and the inconsistencies on defense, it just all adds up to just bad soup.
And I hope that we see some deep shots from the Oregon offense on Saturday against the Beavs, because Oregon fans have been spoiled at quarterback. They really have. I mean, you don't need me to tell you that. Bo Nix was tremendous. Dylan Gabriel was great. They're both in the NFL now. Bo Nix being a starter over there in Denver. Both were Heisman finalists. But Dante Moore just feels like he's got it, man. Like, there's just a special arm there leading that Will Stein offense. Yeah. He's got a stronger arm, I think, is kind of universally agreed upon than both of his predecessors. Looks really comfortable. I love the poise that he operates himself with. He runs a 2-minute drill very well from the first 3 games. We haven't really seen him tested like he probably will be next weekend against Penn State. And that's the tough thing with the coverage, I feel like, Brenden, is like so many people are like, okay, they're already chalking this up as a win. Let's get on to Happy Valley next week. But this is still a really important game for Oregon because it's kind of their last tune-up game, if you will, before they head out to the East Coast for the first time in Big Ten Conference play. So I got a lot of things I'm excited about with this Oregon offense. I think they should definitely try to run the ball, and that's been their bread and butter. But they have some really good skill talent that I hope they showcase. And maybe we see some more explosiveness in the return game or in the special teams game. I know that people were probably pulling their hair out watching that Oregon State punt debacle a couple weeks ago against Fresno State.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, just in general in our business, Max, I've always been one of those people, unless it's egregious, I don't like to call for someone's job, just as I wouldn't like anyone to call for my job. I think sometimes it's necessary in our business, of course. So again, though, how Oregon State did not move off of special teams coach Jamie Christian after the Fresno State game, and then to hear Trent Bray double down on it on Monday and say, well, the only reason we didn't make a change is it's basically inconvenient to do so in the season. Like, oh man. And I think that's not something Oregon State fans wanted to hear. You can tell that group, after Dylan Black, the leading long snapper, had the hand injury and they've had to look at some other options. It's clear that those other options were not prepared coming into the year. And it's nothing on the kids necessarily themselves. Again, I don't like to go at kids. I think that's on their coach for not having them prepared.
I mean, hey, if there's one person, Spencer, that you would probably talk to that knows about the pain that comes with bad special teams play, it's me, a San Francisco 49ers fan, because I had to watch Jake Moody
Oh,
stay
Moody.
on my team for so long.
Yep.
And even though he's gone, I think that the overwhelming consensus is that the 49ers have one of, if not the worst special teams units in the entirety of the NFL. So we've moved on from Moody. But now Purdy's hurt. Now Kittle's hurt, and
Right. Yep.
it's not looking great.
It's just tough, man. I mean, I feel for you as a 49er fan. Obviously, the injuries we've seen in one of my leagues. I got Joe Burrow for fantasy, so I'm just like, all right, kiss that one goodbye. But yeah, it's just special teams are just one of those things that you even just I don't not just you and I, Max, but like for the casual fan, like dare I say, in my own family, I've got family members who are like, the Beavers are on, let's turn it on, watch them play, kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when they can point out to you and be like, why is this so bad? Like, I've watched Oregon State football forever, and like long snap, like it's amazing how much special teams comes into the forefront when it's wrong.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. It's like, you're never paying attention to special teams until it's hurting you. And that seems to be the case. I'm hoping that Oregon special teams can take a step forward in the return game. Like Gary Bryant Jr. is finally healthy. We saw DeCorian Moore take a couple of punts so far this season. So they got guys that can definitely make some plays for them. Brenden, it's been a pleasure getting to chop it up with you about this rivalry game coming up on Saturday. Any final remarks that you had about this game, or anything you wanted to share about what's going on at Beaver's Edge? Now's the time.
Yeah, no, Max, it's been awesome. I appreciate the invite, man. And obviously, for those of you that are over on ScoopDuck, feel free to check on over, see some of our content we got leading in. Obviously, not the most intriguing Civil War matchup, but Oregon State still got some guys you might want to keep an eye on. And as Max said, Malik Murphy, I think everybody in the stadium be able to see Malik Murphy for how tall and how big he stands in that pocket. And I think, as Max mentioned, I think it's definitely going to be an Oregon win this weekend. But for all those Oregon State fans out there, this rivalry will continue, and perhaps sometime soon we'll be able to get to a much more competitive place, even if it's just every other matchup. So again, like as Max is pulling up now, we got lots of content at BeaversEdge.com. Highly encourage you guys to check that out. And Max, thanks again for the invite. Looking forward to doing it again soon, my man.
Absolutely. Well, you guys make sure to tap in with Brenden and check out what he's got going on over there at Beaver's Edge. It's definitely nice to have another West Coast school in the fray here as part of the On3 network. If you guys want to find more of me, you can find me anywhere at Torres Sports. Subscribe to the ScoopDuck On3 YouTube channel. And while you're at it, head on over to ScoopDuck.com and join the community with thousands of other Duck fans. And just come hang out with us and enjoy another fun Oregon football season. And then while you're at it, do me a favor and share the show. Tell another friend, tell another Duck fan about the Duck's Dish podcast. A big thank you to Brenden for coming on, and we'll see you guys in the next episode of the Duck's Dish podcast.